space. Hi, Asa.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Good. We're honored to have you always. You've been at every event this year, so I just know everybody's going to be blessed with some great content here. And if you've missed any of his previous talks, they're all available on demand too. So now I will turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for having me. And what a wonderful talk that was previously from Amin Talati Wasserman. It makes me think if I ever need patent work, I know who to go to. So I really enjoyed sitting in on that. So welcome, everyone. I'm Asa Waldstein. Maggie, thanks for that introduction. Huge thanks to Len, Heather, and the entire team for inviting me to put on this great event. I mean, this is really fabulous. I'm so honored to be here again. So we've got 30 minutes to cover interesting enforcement trends and best practices in the stress and mental wellness space. So I love talking about enforcement trends. It's going to be obvious over the next 20 to 30 minutes, but I also love talking about what we can learn from them. So today's talk will be half enforcement trends updates and then half best practices discussion. What are some practical takeaways we can learn that we can apply to our business from this enforcement? So I know we're going to save time for questions at the end, so please feel free to drop those in, I believe, to the chat or Q&A function. So really quickly about me. 20-year dietary supplement manufacturer and marketer. I've really grown up in the industry. I'm an herbal geek. I have a clinical herbalism background that followed my passion for natural medicine into the dietary supplement space. I am principal of the regulatory consulting company, Supplement Advisory Group. We love finding online marketing risk and then help our clients come up with lower risk but effective ways to talk about their products. And I'm sure everyone out there knows APA, but for those of you who don't know, APA is the American Herbal Products Association, one of the top trade groups for the supplement and hemp industries. And I have a great honor being chair of their wonderful cannabis committee. And I love building regulatory content. I'm a regulatory geek, regulatory nerd through and through. So I write a weekly post called Warning Letter Wednesday, where I review interesting FDA warning letter enforcements and what we can learn from them. This applies to marketers and companies. So I write Warning Letter Wednesday, and I have a whole Regulatory Hints YouTube channel. So I hope we can stay connected either through my LinkedIn, I'm very active on LinkedIn, or my website, which is asawaldstein.com. And a quick legal disclaimer, this is informational purposes only and does not constitute any legal or regulatory advice. All right, let's get to the fun stuff. So I want to start off by talking about some key enforcement trends. I want to talk about some key enforcement trends to be aware of. So old social media posts, this is really important. So the FDA is looking back several years on companies' social media posts, including one warning letter from this year that cited a retweet from 2014. That's an 8-year-old social media post. That's really bananas. I think the only people or agencies looking at old social media posts are the FDA. I get very bored on Saturday nights, and I've not even been that bored to look that far back on social media posts. But I'm adding levity here, but it's a good reminder to clean up old social media posts, because in the eyes of the authorities, they look at an old social media post in the same manner as a current one. Also, claims made on YouTube continue to be mentioned in warning letters. So in a recent warning letter, it actually mentioned claims made in text overlay on a screen. Now, I know what you're saying. YouTube, we know YouTube claims show up all the time in FDA warning letters, but this is the first time that I've seen the text specifically called out in the warning letter rather than the spoken word. So I found that really fascinating. And as we may know, there are two video platforms. There's YouTube and there's Vimeo. There's been lots of FDA warning letters concerning YouTube, but there's only been one Vimeo FDA warning letter ever. So I'm not sure what the reason for that is, but take from that what you may. Also, claims made in blogs. I'll be talking about this several times today. They're commonly mentioned in warning letters. So I suggest companies go back and scan their forgotten old blogs, those blogs that are lurking deep in on your website, scan for disease words, because the FDA is looking at a very old blog in the same manner as a current one, And then CBD products, I'm a big fan, a big proponent of hemp-derived cannabinoid products. I think they are very applicable for the stress and mental wellness space. But this is a crazy metric. There's actually been a 350% increase in CBD-related warning letters this year compared to all of last year. And these are FDA warning letters. So we're only in September, and it's already increased nearly 350% over last year. So there really never has been a more risky time than now to market CBD products while disease claims are present. So it's a good reminder for companies that are selling CBD products to ensure that all marketing is compliant. And also, here's a fun one, and also somewhat contentious: citing clinical studies. This continues to be top of mind for the FDA. So this includes companies citing research about ingredients on their commercial website. So for example, if a company was citing a clinical study about ashwagandha and an anxiety disorder, for example, on their website. So if a company was citing a study about ashwagandha and an anxiety disorder, where ashwagandha is an ingredient in their product that's sold on their website, this is an implied claim. So just mentioning ingredients in the research, if those ingredients are a component in a product sold on the website, this may attract a warning letter. We've seen a lot of action with the FDA on this year, mostly related to citing COVID studies, but still I expect to see more warning letters come out for claims that are maybe not as egregious as COVID. So be careful with that. And of course, mental health claims, they continue to be top of mind for the authorities, and we'll talk more about that later. All right, so I really like this slide because it talks about suggestive words, may and could. Using these words does not allow a company to say whatever they want. So here's an example from a warning letter that I've cited here: may support depression and mood disorders. Now that's pretty over the top, but it's a great example of, yes, using may and should it's not a get out of jail free card. So I think of these suggestive words as the compliance version of with all due respect, right? We wouldn't say to someone with all due respect and then say mean words about them. So this is really the same thing when we're talking about compliance and suggestive words. If we say may and should, it's really the same thing as saying a product can treat a disease, and it doesn't really help mitigate risk. All right, so let's jump into the juicy stuff. Data on anxiety claims enforcement. Because I'm a data geek, I spent a lot of my time, and my assistant, we dig into interesting warning letter trends and metrics. So since the beginning of last year, there's actually been 63 FDA-related warning letters. And this really shows how the agency is focusing on mental health-related claims. So 63 since the beginning of last year. So I wanted to, again, dig into these metrics. So 22% of these warning letters include claims made in hashtags. This is really a fantastic and phenomenal metric, right? It's the easiest way for a company to turn an otherwise compliant social media post into a non-compliant post, just with the use of a disease-related hashtag. About half of these, they include claims made in social media. That should come as no surprise, and I expect that number to increase. Now, 41% of these warning letters, they included claims made in blogs. I've talked about blogs a few times, and I've got a few more bullet points on them later on in the talk, but blogs continue to be where the FDA is finding a lot of these risky words. I oftentimes see companies that will fall into the blog writer's trap, which is they'll talk about a disease, they'll talk about what the disease is, and then they'll suggest that their products may help a symptom of a disease. This is really enough to attract a warning letter. And I know I have a slide on that a little later. Claims made in testimonials were mentioned in 19% of these warning letters. This is really fascinating and a key point. So product reviews, true third-party curated, non-curated rather product reviews, the authorities have been hands-off. Think about product reviews made on a Trustpilot platform on your website, or claims made on Amazon. Now, if those same product reviews that are true non-curated, third-party generated, if we take those claims and then we copy them onto social media, if we take them and then we endorse them by showcasing them on a product page, we've really crossed the line from product reviews that we have nothing to do with, the good, the bad, and the ugly, into endorsing a product claim. So these are testimonials in the eyes of the FDA. If we're using it to sell a product, we're showcasing it, it should be compliant. Now, 33% of these warning letters mention claims regarding CBD. As I mentioned, there's been a huge increase in CBD-related warning letters, and this doesn't really come as a surprise to me. Also, 79% of these warning letters included the 1-2 punch of anxiety and depression. So the FDA in particular in the mental health arena is focusing on companies making depression and anxiety claims. And they don't have to be in the same advertisement. It might be an anxiety statement over here and then a depression statement on a retweet or hashtag. So we want to be careful with that. So I write Warning Letter Wednesday, as I mentioned, so I stayed up late last night looking at anxiety claims enforcement in a little more detail. So when we look at FDA anxiety claims enforcement this year to date, compared with the same period last year, I really found some interesting metrics. And I apologize, I stayed up too late writing Warning Letter Wednesday, and I didn't have an opportunity to make a slide on this. But there's some really cool and interesting learning opportunities here. So when we look at hashtags this year in 2022 were actually mentioned in 27% of the anxiety-related warning letters compared to just 20% last year. So increase in hashtag enforcement, word to the wise for all our social media managers out there. Also, blogs with anxiety claims more than doubled from 30% to 63% of these anxiety claims warning letters this year. So blogs, again, top of mind for the FDA. And two more drastic changes that I wanted to talk about are anxiety and CBD related, animal and CBD related anxiety claims. So CBD warning letters were just mentioned in about 16% of the warning letters in the same period last year, compared to 72% in the same period this year. So really, that's a huge jump, and again, demonstrates the FDA's intolerance to companies making disease claims and selling CBD. Another really interesting metric here, and then I'll move on to the next slide, animal-related warning letters. So when we talk about animal-related warning letters and anxiety, 10% of them were mentioned in the same period last year compared to 45% this year. So huge jump. If I was selling an animal-related product, I would definitely want to scrub the word anxiety from my website. So this is a snapshot into where the FDA is finding and perhaps looking for risk. So I've got a question for everyone out there. Do you consider occasional anxiety to be a claim? Well, as with many things, looking at enforcement trends can help us understand this. So when we look at the 63 anxiety-related warning letters since the beginning of last year, none of them mention the phrase occasional anxiety. So key takeaway here is that focusing on life occurrences such as occasional anxiety, occasional inflammation may be a lower risk strategy. Now, moving over to the NAD. NAD is the National Advertising Division, a regulatory court or body of the BBB, or the Better Business Bureau. So I like to talk a lot about levels of risk with claims, but I don't know if I like it, but what was interesting about this NAD case is they really cited very mild claims that were challenged by the NAD court. So these claims were superior cognitive flow, clarity, memory, alertness, and the capacity to handle stress. Pretty darn low risk in my opinion, but this is a good example of how the NAD can challenge anyone, and a reminder that marketing statements should be substantiated. So I wanted to briefly talk about cognitive function claims enforcement. So statements like improved cognitive function, they've been cited in 4 FDA warning letters this year. But a really interesting learning point is that all these warning letters included high-risk claims such as Parkinson's. So talking about cognitive function, in my opinion, is not likely to attract a warning letter, but when combined with discussions about neurological disorders, this really elevates the risk of an implied treatment claim. So here's a hypothetical. For example, if a company posted a blog that talked about what Alzheimer's is and then suggested possible natural solutions for the symptoms, such as products sold on the website, this would cross the line into possible warning letter territory. Now, I know what you're saying. This sounds really basic, but this is a trap. I see this in my practice all the time that many large and reputable companies fall into. Oh, and a quick aside, And many companies I work with have a robust regulatory review of current blogs, but they haven't went back and reviewed those old blogs for compliance. And since that's where a lot of the enforcement is happening, we always want to be pretty careful with that. So just like socials, the FDA is looking back on blogs several years old. So old blog, old social media posts, they look at it in the same manner as a current one. Also on the screen as part of the cognitive claims, cognitive function citations, there's also a 4-year-old Facebook post that's cited here. So again, a friendly reminder to clean up those old posts. All right, so moving over to brain health claims, here's an example of how a well-respected company is marketing a brain health supplement. So this is an exercise. I blocked out the company's name because I didn't want to inadvertently denigrate them, but it's a good thought experiment in marketing compliance. So we see claims here like brain health and supports youthful memory. These are not high risk as long as the company has substantiation. Now on the same website, there are statements such as helps inhibit inflammation to promote brain health. Now, this is really pushing it, in my opinion, because inflammation related to brain health, that may be disease related. So I would suggest striking this from their advertisement. Because I'm a compliance person and I can't help it, I'd also suggest considering replacing neuroprotective with neurosupportive. We've mitigated risk a little bit by changing that around. And I also like replacing action-oriented words such as promotes and enhances with supports. So for all of our wonderful viewers out there, and thanks everyone for joining us today, I have a question. Are there claims that you're curious about? Feel free to drop a comment in chat or in the Q&A, and hopefully we'll have a chance to review those during our Q&A session. All right, so let's look at an interesting class action lawsuit. Just doing a time check there. So this one involved clinically proven and brain health performance claims. So clinically proven, this is really the highest regulatory standard, and companies should be careful making these statements. So in this slide, it referenced a well-known class action. So this lawsuit concerned clinically proven brain health performance claims. And I should state for the record that I really do like this product. I think it's pretty cool. So let's look at 2 Neuriva labels. One, the one on the left, I pulled from the class action lawsuit, and the one on the right, I pulled from current marketing. So I thought this would be an interesting before and after. So you can see the current example, the one on the left, lists clinically proven. So clinically proven was really the basis of this lawsuit. So the after picture, the clinically proven statement was changed to clinically tested. So clinically proven to clinically tested. Also of note is that natural ingredients was changed to naturally sourced ingredients. All my regulatory and attorney friends out there, I probably can see you nodding your head in the virtual world. Naturally sourced is a really good idea to help mitigate the risk of natural lawsuits. So also of note, you'll see at the bottom of the label, brain performance, that claim was changed to brain health. So when we look at the totality of these labels, we can see how the authorities and courts may look at clinically proven ingredients for brain health performance or brain performance. Let me read that again. Clinically proven ingredients for brain performance and clinically tested ingredients for brain health differently. So it's a good example that even small words matter. All right. This is so funny. My wife looked over as I was preparing for this presentation last night. She said, "What is this slide?" Well, I have a question for everyone. So is brain fog considered a claim? Well, brain fog has been cited in one FDA warning letter. So this FDA warning letter, it was one of these hangover warning letters from a couple years ago. And in this letter, it essentially implied that people can drink while taking the supplement without inebriation. Pretty darn risky. So the brain fog claim was secondary in my opinion. So there's primary claims. People are talking about COVID, drink all you want with the supplement, Alzheimer's, things like that. And then there's also these pig pile or secondary claims. Brain fog, I think, falls into the latter category. So this is pretty interesting. Long COVID or long haul COVID, that can be considered a disability under the American for Disabilities Act or laws, the ADA laws. So I wanted to briefly read a quote from the HHS guidance on long haul COVID symptoms. So this is what we look at when we say, hey, is brain fog a claim? So here's a quote from HHS. A person with long COVID who experiences memory lapses and brain fog is substantially limited in brain function, concentrating and/or thinking. So because of this, because brain fog is a potential symptom of what's considered a disability, it certainly does have a level of risk. So really the takeaway here is everything has a level of risk, but context does matter. So in my opinion, making a brain fog claim, it's not high risk, but that risk would be elevated if, for example, there's someone wearing a mask, right? If there's brain fog and then someone wearing a mask, that could be an implied COVID treatment or implied COVID symptom treatment claim, and we'd want to be careful with that. All right, so just doing a quick time check. I wanted to briefly touch on advertising and total net impression. So total net impression, this is really what we look at when we're reviewing advertisements. It's important to think about what the consumer takeaway is. What would a reasonable consumer take away from this ad? For example, if there was a clinically proven statement and then they list benefits such as memory, maybe a reasonable consumer would expect that the suggested use of the product had been clinically proven to make memory better. Now, as a kind of fun regulatory thought experiment, if these statements were in proximity to an image of an elderly person, maybe the consumer takeaway would be that the product helps memory in older adults and may imply support for Alzheimer's and other disease-related cognitive decline. So I wanted to just say, oftentimes regulatory departments, they review marketing copy, but they may not see the full advertisement. So this is a good exercise to help understand that imagery and context adds to the overall net impression. Okay, so this is going to be my last slide, and then we're going to jump into our Q&A portion because I want to make sure we answer all your wonderful questions. So please do continue to have these come in. So there are a lot of wonderful branded ingredients in the market that have research to back up their efficacy. So many, right? So it's important to remember that just because an ingredient supplier has great clinical information, this doesn't necessarily translate into compliant marketing. So here's an example of clinical data on an ashwagandha supplier's website about ashwagandha and insomnia and anxiety. So if a finished product company, they copied and pasted this study and this citation onto their commercial website, this would be considered a disease claim in the eyes of the authority if they were selling ashwagandha. And so I know people are saying, yes, even the name of a study or a URL can be considered a claim. Oh, actually, I've got one more, and then we'll round it up for Q&A. So how do we talk about clinical research on our commercial website? This is a question I get asked all the time. So really the goal is to communicate the research in a truthful and not misleading way without using risky words. So here's a few examples. So there's something called the Depression Anxiety Stress Scale, DASS. Perhaps we could change that to Stress Scale, DASS. We've removed these high-risk words. Anxiety, perhaps we can change that to mood support, and insomnia, perhaps we could change that to sleep support. So keep those questions coming in. I'm going to turn it over to Maggie for the Q&A portion of our website. Thank you so much for allowing me to talk about these topics. I love enforcement trends, and I hope we can stay connected.
Excellent. Thank you, Asa. So much valuable content there. It's always amazing to me how much you pack into a short talk. So we do have some questions coming in, and I also just want to reiterate what Asa said earlier, that if you have questions about a claim and kind of to get his take on it, to post those in the Q&A there too, just post it and we'll throw it out to him. This is a great question to kick it off. We often hear calls within the industry to self-police. You know, we want to be responsible. And this is one of the categories of the questioner says where I've seen some extreme claims. Is there an opportunity or is there a responsibility for us to self-police if we see companies making violations like what you had shared? And if so, what do we do?
I love that question. So for everyone who knows me, probably would guess that I'm more of a carrot than a stick approach when it comes to everything. So I actually believe in a rising tide approach. So by doing things like these naturally informed events, we're educating about what risk is, what compliance is. Hopefully this will have the light bulb go off in these companies' minds that are making these risky claims. Oh, I shouldn't do this. Now I know better. I've taken a bite of the forbidden fruit. I saw ASA and some other presentations. So now I know better. So I believe in the rising tide approach. Now, there certainly are some unscrupulous characters out there. These are not the companies that are going to be around forever. These are the companies that are going to get a warning letter and then they're going to close down. So people can certainly report things to the FTA, the FTC. You can report them to your state AG, attorneys general. These are things that people may do, but again, I've never done that. I also believe in just educating, which is why I inundate everyone with regulatory hints content on LinkedIn.
Excellent. We have a question here about a claim. Your thoughts on reduces occasional stress, anxiety, and tension.
So we're using reduces. So reduces is one of those action-oriented words. Reduces, promotes. So if we're reducing it, I'd always rather change that to supports. Supports an optimal response to occasional anxiety, stress. Can you read it one more time for me, please?
Yes, hold on. I actually it was reduces occasional stress, anxiety, and tension.
Now we're using occasional. One of the things I love about occasional is it helps bifurcate or separate the implication from a disease claim. So if we're changing promotes to supports, and we're talking about the occasional nature of these things, I don't consider this being called out in a warning letter ever, unless there was high risk claims present.
Okay, I wanted to go back personally to the brain fog. Because I mean, we see this on labels, we see brain fog, and it's kind of like in my mind, it's like brain fog's just like not a medical term, but so I kind of got from what you're saying that it's more of an issue now because of this connection to long haul COVID. So is it common for terms to become riskier if just you have this one medical mention? And how do we stay on top of that? Like your newsletter, I guess. How do we stay on top of this?
Think enforcement trends change, yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I love writing Warning Letter Wednesday. But I love that question, Maggie. That's really wonderful. So if something has a medical billing code, then it's considered a disease claim. I can't remember IB code or something like that. So if it's got a medical billing code, some things are added. Staying on top of that's important, but also staying on top of enforcement trends. So here's a good example with hangover. A few years ago, hangover was considered low risk. The FDA sent out a bunch of warning letters saying, hey, hangover is a treatment of a disease state. We're going to enforce that. So low risk to much higher risk. When we look at brain fog, yeah, because it is now a documented symptom of a disability, that certainly does elevate the risk. But how do we stay on top of this? It's really tough. Reading warning letters. If you're a warning letter geek with me, I salivate when I read these warning letters. But just understanding, what the line is. So I've got a video I made on my YouTube channel, tips for knowing if a claim's being made. One of the examples there is anything ending in itis, ITIS, such as arthritis. That's an obvious disease claim. Now we all know, we've taken a bite of the forbidden fruit, that brain fog does have a level of risk out there. So I didn't necessarily answer your question, but I wanted to kind of address my thought process as I'm looking for claims and risk.
Yeah, and we'll stay tuned and see how it develops. I mean, you don't want to be the one who gets the letter as we see what develops. But another question on a specific claim about free radical formation, and I'll just read: can we make mechanistic claims using in vitro or animal studies without clinical studies if we're talking about free radical formation?
Well, when we're talking about free radical formation, the agencies have been pretty hands-off. I've done a couple deep dives into this. Unless there's corresponding, I'm going to sound like a broken record, disease claims or implied disease claims, free radical damage related to degenerative diseases. super off the hip extreme example there. So in general, having in vitro or animal studies isn't sufficient. I wouldn't want to be in an NAD court or an FTC court or a courtroom defending a lawsuit or NAD with an animal study or in vitro. So really using human studies is gold standard. For example, if someone had that claim on pack on their label and they submitted it to Whole Foods would say, hey, we're not going to accept animal studies and in vitro studies because it's not done in humans. So that's a good example about how we have regulating bodies, FDA, FTC, NAD, but then we also have these large distributors that have their own nuanced take on regulatory compliance and substantiation.
All right, excellent. Our time is up. I do want to say there was a question about looking at some of the slides again. Those will be up when the on-demand content is up. The slide deck will also be up. I think Asa was happy to share that. And you can reach out to him, as he said, with questions. Follow that Wednesday newsletter, which is so interesting every week. So definitely follow that. So thank you, Asa.
Thank you. It's been a great honor. Have a great day. Thank you.